We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Monday, April 1st, 2024. We've got an exciting episode for you as the Chicago White Sox completed the sweep of the Detroit Tigers. Ha! April Fools. Get it? No, not funny. Well, it takes a certain sense of a dark sense of humor, I should say, to laugh away the pain that was the opening weekend for the Chicago White Sox in 2024 as they got swept at home to start the season to the Detroit Tigers. The first time the White Sox have started 0-3 since 2015, but don't worry, White Sox fans. The schedule gets a little easier with the... Hold on, let me check my notes. Yes, the Atlanta Braves are now visiting. We'll recap the weekend that was, preview that White Sox and Braves series, and take a look around Major League Baseball after the first weekend. Joining me are the managing editor of SoxMachine.com, Jim Margulis, and Sox Machine's beat reporter, James Fegan. James, what a start for the 2024 White Sox. James, how is Pedro Grifol feeling about his team after the first weekend?
They're not getting blown off the field, so I guess that's kind of the lining. He said the line. I think he opened the whistle these were heartbreakers. We were in every game. We got to win these. At the same time, this is a team that if they're not going to win the run games, they're kind of screwed because they're not going to blow other teams away. So there's the kind of the solace of, they don't look. They look what they're supposed to do, pitching, defense. It's largely looked fine. I feel the biggest offense, pitching, collapse was Soroka's, first inning, and Pedro Grifol's stopped just short of looking in the camera and saying he was dipping in the first inning. So there, other than that, there hasn't been this big destruction of their concept of how to survive. They pitched decently, they defended decently in every game. They haven't gotten blown off the field. It's just if you're not going to win close one-run games against the Tigers that are swung on single situational outcomes, what games are you going to win? Probably not. It's showdowns with the Braves, with the back end of your rotation pitching the majority of the series. The Tigers did not throw an offense out there that blew the White Sox off the table talent-wise. And to get 3 wins in your home park and then lose Eloy Jimenez in the process. Not that this is something that we're not acquainted with, but certainly any rosy view of this offense, involves him being high functioning. The fact that we've gone from, man, he's hitting 400 in spring training as he really unlock it, to I guess we'll be without him for weeks on end again. It's come hard and fast.
Yeah, Jim, we looked it up before recording this show. The last time the Chicago White Sox started a season getting swept in a series at home was back in 1986, which we all know was a great year for the Chicago White Sox. With all 3 losses by 1 run, in a way, can we fault this bad start for the White Sox to bad luck?
Kinda. I mean, in the sense that every game is, one-run game has some luck going into it. Like the White Sox, especially on Sunday, like the strike zone that was basically ankle high, and White Sox they got acquainted with that zone under high leverage circumstances, and then the rest of the game was basically just not adjusting to it and striking out, looking I think 7 times. So they struggled with all game, but they at a point where they're still learning the strike zone, those strikeouts are pretty costly. So, I mean, like there's kind of a luck element there. A lot of it had to do, I think, with just the White Sox, like their bullpen is unorganized, I think would be the nice way to put it. I don't really have a semblance of like who Grifol should be throwing out there. Like Steven Wilson looks okay. Like Michael Kopech, really nice inning, or a nice 1 2/3 inning his last time out. So like maybe he's their closer if they ever get a save situation. Jordan Leisure, looked like a rookie who had some strikeout stuff and also some wobbles early on. But like, it seems like every inning is just like, yeah, John Brebbia is coming out. Sure, I guess. Like almost like spring training. Like who's got to get their work in? Who's scheduled to throw today? Well, it's Soroka for 5, and then Brebbia and Hill, and just kind of list on the list. Like, yeah, I guess we don't know enough about them. They haven't achieved enough to where there's really a strict hierarchy. And then 2 games in a row, like hinging on Tim Hill facing a righty, and that didn't go well for San Diego last year. Not going well for the White Sox so far. So some of it is bad luck, but other just kind of games being close enough to where the White Sox lack of talent eventually emerges, and they have to pay the price for it. This felt more like less about the White Sox and more about the Tigers. If the Tigers are going to be good, I think they have to beat up on the White Sox this year. Kind of like I was looking at previous season opening sweeps. One was in 2003 in Kansas City. And that was a year where the Royals were surprising for most of the year, kind of tailed off at the end, but like stealing 3 games against the White Sox who weren't quite ready and to start the season. Like Mike McDougal, I remember having like an awesome, like mind-blowing breaking ball that early. But for the Tigers, like I think if they're going to compete and contend, like they have to win series like this. They have to beat up on the White Sox. And so it's a good start for them in doing what they have to do. So in case like the schedule firms up and their offense doesn't quite live up to some of the promise they have, even though they haven't quite proven it yet, like they're still banking these wins against the White Sox team that is really bankable for a lot of teams that really want to get that edge.
The Detroit Tigers last year were quite good against American League Central. They were 35-17 against the AL Central last year, and now they start this season 3-0. We could talk about all the bad stuff, and we have in the past in this particular podcast for those that have been listening to us for now what is our 11th season. But I do not want to suck the life out of White Sox fans in the opening weekend. There is some good to discuss from this series to pay attention to and root for them to be good trends and performances that the White Sox can count on, because there's just not a lot to count on for the White Sox in a positive manner after this opening weekend. And I think a good place to start, James, and I'll admit it, I look like an idiot after opening day thinking that Garrett Crochet could never be a starting pitcher. He made me look dumb because he goes out, he throws 6 innings of 1-run ball, only allows 5 hits, doesn't walk a batter. Last year, Garrett Crochet walked 7 of the 20 Detroit Tigers batters that he faced, doesn't walk anyone, and he strikes out 8. And you wrote about it, and Jim made this comparison as well, and I think this is information coming from Ethan Katz. It feels like some 2021 Carlos Rodon comparisons are being made to Garrett Crochet entering into this season. And we all remember, like I counted out Carlos Rodon going into that season as well. Like he was awful in 2020. Just go back and watch that playoff performance against Oakland. He couldn't get anyone out. And then he shocks everyone. And how he starts that season, he throws a no-hitter, almost throws a perfect game. And Rodon has a fantastic 2021 season. So is that what the White Sox are hoping for? Is that Garrett Crochet, James, becomes a 2021 version of Carlos Rodon?
Well, it's funny because like the initial Carlos Rodon comparison I was given was more about like the workload, like, hey, coming off of, Baylor throwing any innings at all. It's kind of like Rodon was in 2020, the COVID year. He was coming back from TJ that year, and then he only got one or two starts that COVID, some of them being truly disastrous relief appearances. He wound up going 130 innings the next season, but kind of hitting a wall. And that's maybe wouldn't be, I mean, that'd be a great result for Crochet. You know, as much as we don't want him to hit a wall, like 130 innings built up after having no track record whatsoever, that would be like catching lightning in a bottle a little bit. But the other kind of Crochet parallel I heard was from Brian Bannister this weekend, which was that this is somebody who, you know, the whole discussion of Crochet is, does he have a third pitch? Can he throw a changeup? He needs that to be a starter. And him kind of saying, this reminds me of kind of a flat fastball slider combo where, yeah, he has a third pitch, but maybe it's like fastball slider that's 90% on the third pitch. Where the third pitches are kind of the changeup and the cutter, giving him like the piecing together 5% each to really give him that 10%. But really, he's getting by on that fastball slider. It's just something to tinker in there a little bit when he feels like someone's getting on either one. And talking to Crochet a little bit today, he gets a lot of just by the shape of his slider, some questions about whether it's a sweeper. And he was saying, like, yeah, it has a kind of sweeper action to it, but I don't want to think about it in that way because I'm trying to throw through it. I'm trying to throw it hard. If I throw think sweeper, I'm going to throw a loopier pitch. He almost described it as a slurve a bit, but he still doesn't want to think slurve. He just wants to think hard slider because that's what's going to get him the shape it's going to be. I think we saw probably a slurvier pitch in his debut is like maybe lower 80s, and he, it kind of has a little bit of a loopy movement. He wants it to be high 80s and on sharp, but when he tried to do that during spring, he felt like the shape just got messed up, and he kind of accepted it for a little bit for his is. His goal was that he was going to kind of keep the loopier breaking ball and have it just turn to a curveball and then build a really hard slider. And he said like that just didn't take. And so with the discovery in spring with the cutter was kind of him finding more of a weird middle ground of, I'm going to keep my slider as it is. It works for me. It's effective. It's consistent. And I'm going to instead of making my slider the midpoint between my fastball and curveball, I'm going to put in this mid of a cutter between my heater and my slider. And that's going to be something I can drop in for strikes every now and then, and gives a different velocity band, but it's not going to really take like it's going to be a distant third pitch. He's got a little hope for the changeup because he showed me a kind of a Vulcan grip that he's using for today. He's obviously not a guy who comes off with like natural, Drew Thorpe level feel for changing speeds. Mm-hmm. But if he can get a changeup grip that he just kind of set it and forget it and then rip it as hard as he can and thinks it is a power pitch, which is kind of what he's going for right now. He thinks he can maybe get a little bit more consistency with the changeup. He finds that his worst changeup is the one that he thinks of terms of taking it off and trying to just place it for a strike. If he really just maybe rips it, maybe he'll find some, weird Tommy Canley like consistency of it. Like that was probably the best example of a guy who has a really good changeup who has no feel for changing speed. Tommy Canley just had a grip, just threw it as hard as he could. So that's maybe the vision for what you get Crochet a little bit, but really he's a guy that kind of like Rodon at this point where he's got his heater with like 7 feet of extension and whatnot, and his velocity's back and his slider is getting whiffs. That's really what it could be, his kind of 2-pitch bread and butter more than out. And the other two like developmental pieces, as interesting as to talk to him about it, are not so important for carrying the load for him.
Yeah, because in opening day, when he did use a changeup, which I think I only saw him throw it twice in that start, James. I liked how when he threw the pitch, the opposing batter didn't even bother offering at it. So quality-wise, to your point, it's not there. But that opposing hitter was looking for slider and got busted looking at strike 3 on a fastball in the inside corner. So even though it's not going to get any whiffs and get anybody out right now, it is getting opposing hitters to overthink facing Crochet, where that fastball has just been so good, Jim. It was good in spring training. And I liked on how you mentioned the idea, like when we were watching Crochet during spring training, we were wondering, what is that second pitch going to be for Crochet to throw strikes? And maybe it's as easy as Crochet's breaking stuff does not work in Arizona. Put him into another pile of pitchers, no matter the team. The breaking stuff just doesn't work during spring training, and we don't have a good sense until they get into the majors and get away from their spring training facility. Did you like the way that Pedro Grifol used Garrett Crochet on opening day, extending him to that 6th inning?
he maxed out at 20 pitches in an inning. So like there were no like high stress slogs that made you recalculate like what his pitch count could be. Like say like if he opened the game going 13 pitches, then 25 pitches, then 28 pitches, all of a sudden, like, a fourth or fifth inning, like a full fourth inning might be tough because like, that's the kind of up and down he hasn't really done. Like he's throwing 2 or 3 innings at a time, but he hasn't thrown a really tough inning and then had to go back out there. Like it's usually been like, if first inning was easy, throw a second. Second inning was easy, throw a third. In this case, like having an obligation to go at least 4 or 5, I think is something he hasn't been tested on. And he wasn't tested on in this opening day start. Like he was just pretty much breezing through innings. The Tigers, besides Mark Canha, were averaging 3.3 pitches per plate appearance. Canha was 7 pitches per, but like just the other, once Canha was out of the way, the at-bats were short, and he was able to save pitches and keep some powder dry. So when it comes to like being tested the way starting pitchers often are tested, he wasn't tested. And that's ultimately good. Like ideally a pitcher would never have to deal with that. It'd be like Greg Maddux more often than not. Then when you get to the 7th inning, you've thrown 80 pitches and like, oh, this has been a breeze. So, that's not a problem. It's just something that we don't know, like how well he can rebound. Like say, like if he throws a 30 pitch first inning, like how much does he have left? Like we don't know that. And, ideally he holds off in that question for as long as possible. But yeah, given how easy most innings were, pretty much every inning was, Grifol had a pretty easy case of it. But I think like, if you're going to commend him, I would say like, didn't overthink it, wasn't too rigid about it. So like, he feels good. His velocity's fine. Like I'm assuming they have somebody monitoring release points, arm slot, making sure nothing's dropping or he's not compensating with any other body parts he shouldn't be to get velocity that he lost with his normal delivery. So I assume, based on how everybody's watching him, that he was looking like he should. So yeah, it's good that Grifol got out of the way. So pretty simple the first time through. I think there are bigger tests along the way, but yeah, there was nothing really to respond to, and that's a credit to everybody.
Yeah, we'll talk about Crochet's next start. Does it get any easier for Garrett Crochet? He'll face the Atlanta Braves. We'll preview that start later in this podcast. Again, I'll admit it. I looked dumb. After his first start on opening day, he looked great against the Detroit Tigers. And if he can continue this, then I'll continue to look like an idiot. And then the White Sox may have something here as they're desperately looking for frontline starters after trading Dylan Cease.
I was also skeptical.
Thank you for being in my boat. Thank you for being in my boat, James. On the offensive side, Luis Robert hit 2 homers in the second game of the series and was carrying much of the offense for the White Sox before Braden Shoemake hit a homer on the very first pitch that he saw this year. His first career homer, his first career major league hit is a home run. We'll talk about Shoemake in a moment, but Luis Robert, after the game, James, mentioned his offseason training focusing on quadrants in the strike zone and not trying to deviate, looking and trying to swing at pitches at particular quadrants in a zone. Can you provide a little bit more insight in Robert's new technique at the plate? Because that second game, just look at the exit velocities. Every exit velocity of the ball that he put in play was over 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, I mean, he just said that his drill was like he'd set a quadrant he was at, and then he'd get, free, kind of like game pitching. And it's just like, if I'm looking top left, I'm swinging at everything top left, and I'm letting everything pass. And it's more of the idea of having like a set zone, especially early in the count, because his 2-strike approach, his no stride swing has always been pretty fine. He's aggressive, but like you can see him, you see him like swing randomly and put himself in an 0-2 hole, and you think like, well, this is toast, and he kind of wriggles his way out. I want to say at an above average rate, without even looking at the numbers. It's the early strike count decisions, even something that Jose Castro would say last year was, his struggle area. So it's just about like setting a quadrant that he's like heat on early in the count and just not pivoting out of it over and over again. And, it kind of sounds like not the most world-changing idea, but like I followed up on, he's like, no, I never did this before. This is not drilling home something I already did. This is a new drill. And certainly when Robert kind of interjects, he's not super forward about new things with him or Like he's not someone who's touting the new tweakies at all the time. Like if he's bringing something up, it's because it's like it's very purposeful. It's like the opposite end of like Adam Engel as a new stance. So it feels like something to watch, even if like sure everyone's trying to swing at strikes more often. I don't think it's updated yet, but like the initial StatCast, I think through 2 games and meaningless. It's literally like they shade it differently to show you how meaningless the sample is. But his chase rate out of the zone was like 17.6%. That thing has never been south of 40. So
Wow.
yeah, it's 2 games. It doesn't mean anything, and it will normalize to some degree. But like the scale to which it's been like the most chase happy outfielder, most chase happy hitter in baseball, really anything drawn down, given how good he's been, is like, could this be like a huge switch in his game? And he didn't really do much of anything Sunday offensively, though he didn't look bad in any at bats, and he certainly got victimized with the ankle high strike zone. But yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I know I got like plenty of mentions when I put that out there, like CC, Eloy, and Luis, or CC, Eloy, and Yohan. And I think there's we've written a lot about their efforts to try to add plate discipline to different parts of the team over the past year or so. But I think since Luis Robert tends to do his own thing and work with his own private hitting coaches in the offseason, it's probably is more of a development to watch for him more than anyone else at this point. But it's intriguing in a season where we don't have a ton of stuff that's intriguing.
That's a good point, James. And Jim, like, I find that encouraging where Luis Robert, okay, he's got his own private hitting guy. This is something, though, he's working on the offseason because after having a career year, he wants to find that next level. So I find that to be very encouraging. And this technique reminds me of the book from MVP Machine, which I know that book's not aging well with all the chapters about Trevor Bauer. But the particular chapter about the Houston Astros and the way that they were developing hitters and trying to encourage all hitters through all their levels that if you are ahead in the count, please do not swing at pitches in the outside corner. Your zone, the quadrants that you are looking for, middle in, middle in. And on 2-0, even 2-1, they beat you in the outside corner. They beat you on the outside corner. But when you're ahead, Astros want their hitters to always be thinking middle in to take advantage of any mistakes coming into that part of the quadrant. And they've been doing that for all these years since MVP Machine has came out, and they have 7 straight American League Championship Series appearances. So clearly the model works. And I just find it to be very encouraging that Luis Robert is adapting this and inserting it into his own game, even though he went out and did it on his own. I don't know if other White Sox hitters are going to have that same type of discipline or philosophy like Robert is having for the entire season. That's where we're going to have to differentiate when we do analysis on White Sox hitters.
Yeah, I'm curious whether that's something just where everybody can say they're doing it, but it's really just a matter of like, can you actually see it? Like in the first whatever milliseconds the ball is coming out of the hand, can you identify the quadrants based on just the release point and the spin? Like how fast can you pick it up? Because you might say like, yeah, I'm looking, upper part of the zone or up and away, or looking to poke at the right field, and just like kind of like Eloy's plate appearances with the bases loaded off Will Vest. Like he looked like he was looking middle in because like he was swinging at pitches 2 to 6 inches off the plate inside, running fastballs that might have looked like strikes. Like he looked like he was zone hitting, but his zone ended up being a lot bigger than I think, was healthy. Like, yeah, I think he was looking for inside, not outside. So he didn't roll a pitch over, but then he ended up like expanding his quadrant to be like almost on his hands. So I think that's probably why it's like easier said than done. And I imagine just something like some teachers don't connect with every hitter, but they have a message that connects to one guy and may not connect with another. And that's why like they shop around for hitting coaches to try to find one that works. But yeah, I mean, like, I think what's most refreshing is like last April was the weird, like, week where Robert wasn't a great teammate and he wasn't reporting injuries and he was cutting off Jimenez in the outfield and he just looked kind of either burned out or checked out. White Sox were losing. He was playing okay, except then Robert wasn't playing okay and like striking out 15 times in like 7 games or something. So like, it's nice to see that although the team is obviously not competing for anything, like he's like just tuning that out and trying to like elevate himself above everything, kind of like reaching that Dylan Cease plane of existence where, the team's falling apart around him and he's just like, yeah, like runner up in Cy Young, if doesn't work out here, I might get traded somewhere better. Like just kind of maintaining that, that level head and just trying to improve to where like his situation will improve somehow, as long as he keeps doing what he's doing, even if the White Sox don't join him.
Yeah, I get the sense from Luis since last year, Jim, and that's a good point that you make, where he had that bad week. And a lot of us turned on Luis for that bad week and just the bad on the field mannerisms. To watch him after that bad week have the type of season that he had. Like Luis, I get the sense that he's chasing greatness. Like he wants to be great. And no matter what team he is on, he is like laser focused and try to be the greatest version baseball player that he could possibly be. And that's really cool to see when he's with the White Sox right now. We're kind of seeing it right now in New York with Juan Soto and the series that he had to start the season against the Houston Astros. We'll talk about that later in the podcast. But I always get a kick out of like professional athletes when they search for greatness. You could just see it in their play on the court, on the field. When they get hit that next level, it's just really cool to see. One last thing on the good side, the White Sox shortstops have already hit 2 homers this year. Last year in 2023, they only hit 3. So they got a chance here this upcoming series against Atlanta to eclipse and surpass what they did last year. The power department is both Paul DeJong, Apo Taco barely went over the wall, and Brandon Shoemake both hit homers. And James, we saw Shoemake get a couple starts in this series, a start at shortstop, a start at second base. Nicky Lopez got 2 starts at second. DeJong got 2 starts at short. Are these 3 players to start the season? Have you got any clues from Pedro Grifol that they're going to be playing some type of rotation?
I mean, the idea was primarily for Shoemake to kind of move around. He kind of touted the idea that he could rotate all over the infield. I just think he kind of made this kind of immediate impact that definitely led to some temptation to ride the hot hand a little bit, or to see what he had, especially with a right-handed starter coming up and providing a little bit more, left-handedness. He's certainly... Not that like being on base has been something he's been super consistent with in his career, but once he gets on base, I think he provides possibly as good of a base stealing threat as anybody in that group, probably more than Nicky Lopez. His success rate, maybe even when you're not concerned about injury, is maybe the way you were with Luis Robert. Maybe he's kind of your most compelling base stealing threat on the team. So I think I would have expected 1 start out of 3 based on the way they've talked about the rotation and their roster, until he kind of went bonkers on Saturday and kind of made it like, why not give him a little bit more run and see what you can do and see if he can offer a little bit left-handed threat against Jack Flaherty. I think it would, just as I would expect at some point he will fall back to earth, I would expect him to kind of fall back into utility role. I will say, like with, Jimenez probably almost certainly going on the IL and Lenyn Sosa coming up, I don't think Sosa is going to come up and take a lot of opportunities from Shoemake away. It's more just like, well, we need a position body, and he's already on the 40-man, but I don't think he would upset the rotation that already seems inclined to let Shoemake work his way into rotation as much as he forces it. And yeah, he's fun right now. He runs around. He's at least feeling something to swing. The big thing that was kind of like in his draft profile is that he never really grew into the power that you see the 6'4" frame, and someone who's athletic and is stuck at shortstop. He was expected to grow into, like, as much as he's also 6'4", like you have him. He was pretty close to Colson Montgomery locker in spring training, and these things don't look like each other. Colson's a lot more built for power than Shoemake is, but if he found anything at all, I think the infield situation is such where he could get some run, and literally lives up to the fast motto as much as anybody, in the sense that he was literally quoting it post game and saying, like, this coaching staff is great, and I'm getting a chance to play baseball, because obviously he hasn't really gotten that major league opportunity in any sustained way beforehand. So he's kind of someone who would be very all into anything they ask him to do, because he hasn't been asked to do anything at the major league level before, and this is a chance.
Yeah, Shoemaker's post-game quotes remind me a little bit of like listening to John Schriffen during the game. Like, he's excited about what he's seeing and doing, but like he should be, because like he's getting the chance, and like Shoemaker's getting the chance, Schriffen's getting the chance. So like you hear their excitement and it sounds a little bit silly or misplaced on jaded ears and eyes, but like, yeah, individually, like it's cool for them. Lopez, I was looking at his numbers because he did get caught stealing on the front of the double steal where like Shoemaker took home, and like, one thing I kind of wonder about with Lopez is like he went from stealing 22 out of 23 bags in 2021 to only going 6 for 8 last year with like the new rules, and his sprint speed doesn't seem knocked down a peg or anything like that to where like he looks like he's been, hiding something like an injury or anything like that. So I'm curious like why that hasn't been a component. And then starting the year 1 for 7, like if he's not running the bases as well as he did like during peak BABIPing Nicky Lopez, like I'm curious, like if he could be replaced by any hot middle infielder that shows up and like gets on a roll.
We're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsors, but coming after the break, we'll talk about the bad that happened after the weekend. James has already alluded to it. Eloy Jimenez might be heading to the injured list. Lenyn Sosa is coming back, and not a great performance from Andrew Vaughn, Andrew Benintendi, Eloy, Yohan Moncada from the opening weekend, and we'll preview the next series for the Chicago White Sox as the Atlanta Braves come to town, again, after a quick word from our sponsors. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. I use Game Time all of the time, especially when visiting other Major League Baseball ballparks. Plus, with the option to see prices with fees included, I can avoid sticker shock when checking out. Worked great last year when I visited Seattle for the first time, attending Felix Hernandez's jersey retirement ceremony. For the Atlanta Braves series this week against the Chicago White Sox, Game Time has tickets under $5, and you could grab a ticket in the 300 level for under $40. Not a bad idea with wet weather coming. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our promo code Sox Machine for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use our promotion code Sox Machine, all one word, for $20 off. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Welcome back to the Sox Machine podcast. All right, so we spent a great bit of time talking about the good things that happened over the weekend for the White Sox. We'll try to limit to the bad because, again, they got swept by the Detroit Tigers. We could spend a lot of time talking about all the bad things that happened for the White Sox. But what I really want to circle are two numbers. One, the White Sox are 1 for 14 hitting with runners in scoring position. And poor Eloy, the game found him multiple times. He had multiple chances on Saturday and Sunday to help out the White Sox offensively. Eloy was 0 for 5 with runners in scoring position. No RBIs. He struck out twice. So the White Sox scored 0 runs when Eloy was at the plate with runners in scoring position. That's not great. I mean, you want your cleanup hitter to have that many opportunities in a 3-game series. Eloy just couldn't come through. And now, James, as you mentioned before we went to the break, Eloy's hurt. What happened? He was sprinting down the first baseline again and got hurt. Like, are you getting any sense of how severe this particular injury is?
Grifol was pretty mum post game. He didn't really want to go into it. He didn't want to, confirm that, they're making a roster move. I kind of asked, like, are you prepared to make a move? And he said, like, yeah, we'll be prepared, but we don't know if we're going to make a move yet. For my money, Jimenez didn't look like he wasn't full speed his previous ground out, and he didn't look super like comfortable, but it wasn't like it just looked like a ground out from maybe last season where he kind of took it at half speed, where an obvious out and he didn't bust it out, and a little bit whatever. Maybe he's not feeling great that day. The next that ground out was obvious, like immediate, like couldn't accelerate at all, and immediately looked in pain, and it was clear. So what they're calling was an adductor strain, and the sad story of Eloy Jimenez's career is that we have an immediate frame of reference for adductor strain. He strained an adductor on a swing, or I want to say remember the weird play? He kind of looked weird on a swing, and put the ball in the play, and he both looked awkward on the swing and looked awkward running up the first base line back in Charlotte, because I watched so much AAA Charlotte back during those years. So he missed 2 weeks when that happened. Obviously, that would be, in the grand scheme of things, kind of great. And just knowing that it was previously an abductor strain doesn't necessarily key us on the severity of it. But Pedro Grifol did say, like, this is an injury that he's had before. So if it's on that line, it's a standard kind of IL placement. But maybe not, the season alterer on, but we've also seen little things kind of add up to a full year of Eloy Jimenez never really getting in rhythm, or having it be delayed for 2 months. And he gets going for another 3 weeks, and then another thing pops up, and you wind up looking at a full season product where it's like, what happened here? There are memories where it looked like he was a god of hitting, and then you look like, a Mark Kotze season for no reason. So I at this point, I have no count. I'm sure, like, back 2018, 2019, 2020, I was telling people it's a freak injury, and he's trying hard, and he's been in better shape this year. But I don't know what I'd say to everyone who's just kind of exhaustion at this point and throws up their hands. Like, this is a project we've seen them try so many times and have no success. And the idea of him getting a rhythm just seems like such a unreachable goal at this point. And it's funny how quickly we've gotten here after Eloy Jimenez is better than ever in spring training. This is the best we've ever seen him. He's locked in, hullabaloo that I feel like was just like 2 or 3 podcasts ago, and it's already kind of gone. And, not that we weren't already kind of frustrated and wondering what was going on with this approach before that. As I said, I confirmed with the source that Sosa's coming up. Looking at the game logs, it seemed like he was pulled maybe mid at bat in Charlotte, which I wish that there was like some video of like Urshel like running onto the field and throwing his body in front of the pitch to make sure the game couldn't go any farther. But I haven't seen any clips of that just yet. But it seems like it's more just an easy 40-man move of get a position player up, but not really something that takes Jimenez's place. Gavin Sheets pitch hit for him today, and immediately it allowed Detroit to keep their lefty in, and there was not a competitive bat as a result. And so that kind of speaks to kind of the weird position they'll be in a DH going forward, that people can bring in a lefty for Sheets, and then you're wondering, what do you do? Is Corey Lee our DH? Is Kevin Pillar our DH in this situation? If he's not already platooning with Dominic Fletcher as is, it's just not a very deep offense, and it's weird to be considering he wasn't even in the org like 2 weeks ago, to be like, get here soon, Robbie Grossman, to make the roster work, is a weird place to be. But that just reflects where the season is and where it's at.
During the game on Saturday, like James and I are like, and Josh are kind of throwing ideas around in terms of like, what are we going to cover? What are we going to write about? What are questions to ask after the game to, address the topic we're thinking about. And as the game's going on, like, and Jimenez's bats are piling up, it's like, I think I'm going to write about Eloy. And it's second game of the season. You don't want to make too much of one game, especially in the first week of it always feels severe and like overreacting. But like watching Jimenez, hit a weird grounder on a first pitch slider just with an ineffective swing, and then roll a ball over and strike out and ground into a double play, like expand the zone. Like, he's doing all the things that he, did in previous years that just prevented him from being his best. And same thing with like the weird base running decision he made, like breaking on a ball in the dirt that was caught cleanly on the hop and taking off late for a second, getting thrown out. Just all these marginal subtractions from his value that just really hamper his ability to provide for a team. And just watching that all kind of happen in one game, it's like, well, I think I can write about this just as like a snapshot, just like, well, here's the full array of everything Jimenez does poorly, and this is what he has to tackle over the rest of the season. I'll write it like that. And I did mention too, like, at least he didn't get hurt, and then he gets hurt the next game. But just like, I feel like those are like blogger instincts kicking in. Like, I've been doing this long enough, like 17 years, where like just spidey senses tingling of like seeing some early warning signs, like, oh, that 2-part swing on a first pitch slider, why do you do that? And just triggering some memories in the back of your head that you aren't necessarily thinking about, but are somehow activating some subconscious impulses, like something's going to go wrong here, and I better write about it while it's still news. And if I waited one day, then that whole post is not worth writing, because all of a sudden he's injured and now irrelevant from the proceedings for the next couple of weeks. So that's, I think, just our experience of watching Jimenez is like, it doesn't take much to all of a sudden realize, this is going wrong again.
Yeah, this series was a microcosm of his entire career with the White Sox. And I think everyone that's been watching him over the years, what's going to be different? What's going to change for Eloy? I don't have any answers. I don't think the White Sox have answers. I don't know if Eloy has answers right now and why things are just not clicking for him.
I haven't had an answer, and it's not a solution, but we have Eloy Jimenez leaping up against the wall and making like an incredible catch. We have Luis Basabe hitting a 450-foot tank off Hunter Green to the opposite field or dead center. And we have a defensive highlight from Oscar Colas. The futures game is nothing but lies. We should never pay attention to one again. All it can do is mislead us.
Sorry, Jonathan Cannon.
Yeah.
You're next.
Did you give up a run, or do you have a clean inning? Or do you
I
give
thought
up
it was scoreless, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think he had a clean inning. That doesn't bode well.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, that's not going to be good news for our best friend, Jim Callis. Jim Callis loves the futures game, but it doesn't work out for the White Sox, so maybe they could skip it. The other disturbing number for me, I think Detroit's pitching can be quite good this year. Underrated as an entire unit. That bullpen, very effective, especially Foley coming in to close out games. I mean, he's throwing 100-mile-per-hour sinkers. Good luck. However, Yohan Moncada, Andrew Benintendi, Andrew Vaughn, and Eloy Jimenez combined to hit 8 for 46 in the opening series. That's a 174 batting average. The 4 combined for 1 walk, and they struck out 11 times. As I wrote in my season predictions, I don't see this White Sox team winning 70-plus games, but if they're going to, these 4 hitters need to have much better seasons they had in 2023. It's just the opening weekend, but can't have it. These guys, with the hitters the White Sox are trotting out 6 through 9 in their lineup, Moncada, Benintendi, Vaughn, and Jimenez need to do more of the heavy lifting to help out Luis Robert. And with Jimenez entering the injured list because of his latest injury, running down to first base, more pressure on Moncada, Benintendi, and Vaughn to help out and pick up some more of the slack offensively for the White Sox. That leads us to preview the upcoming series as the Atlanta Braves roll into town. They won 2 out of 3 in Philadelphia against the Phillies. And offensively, oh boy, the Atlanta Braves had 17 extra base hits in the 3 games against the Phillies. They hit 12 doubles in 3 games against the Phillies. Your probable pitchers for this series starting at Monday. This is a 1:10 p.m. Central Time start. No, not April Fools. They're playing at 1:10 on a Monday. Charlie Morton's going to take the ball for the Atlanta Braves against Chris Flexen, who makes his White Sox debut. On Tuesday night at 6:40 p.m. Central Time, it's old friend Ronaldo Lopez will make the start for the Braves against Garrett Crochet, making his second start of the season. And on Getaway Day, Wednesday at 1:10 p.m. Central Time, Spencer Strider will be making the start for the Atlanta Braves, and it's to be announced for the White Sox. But James, we're thinking Nick Nastrini, right, will be called up to make his first major league start for that Wednesday game.
We're thinking a rain out and they get to put off this 40-minute move longer than they need to. But yes,
if it doesn't rain,
if things hold, then yes, Nastrini is at the ready to be thrown into hell on first opportunity.
Yeah, let's talk about the big story in this series, and it's going to be that wonderful spring weather in Chicago. This is the projected forecast, the first pitch of each of these games. Monday, 44 degrees, 45% chance of rain. Tuesday night, 38 degrees with a 45% chance of rain. Wednesday, 37 degrees with a 45% chance of snow. So, Jim, like I mentioned, the Braves hitters, big offensive weekend against the Phillies. Can Chicago weather be the biggest factor in this series and help the White Sox win at least one game against the mighty Braves?
I don't know if it'll help them win one game because like the White Sox offense needs help as well. But yeah, I think there's some chance that just lack of ball carrying, for instance, or just pitches resonating on the bat the way they wouldn't in warmer weather turns it into one of those slop games in the NFL, or the Chiefs Dolphins game where it was 10 below and some people lost limbs because of exposure. That it's going to be that kind of environment.
I'm sure it's worth it, by the way.
Yeah.
Right, Jim? It was totally worth it.
Yeah. But having Miami go into that environment and slow them down, not that the White Sox are the Chiefs here, that's this analogy has its limits, but just, anything that can maybe help a Chris Flexen against this offense is worth doing. Otherwise, I was thinking when it comes to the White Sox looking at the series, or White Sox fans looking at the series, I think now that the White Sox are firmly in rebuild mode, I think this is the time to kind of disassociate from the White Sox and just say, hey, I want to watch a good team. Let's just sit back and watch the Braves. How do they go about their business? Who are these players I've heard about, but maybe haven't gotten a chance to watch all that often, but I see their highlights. Let me see what they do. Kind of like in the last NBA game I went to was the last year before the Celtics got the big three. And
that was so long.
It was so long. I haven't been to an NBA game since, but I had fourth row tickets on the free throw line in Boston, and I watched Manu Ginobili and Tim Duncan up close, and that was really cool. So I saw one good team, and I was yeah, this is pretty cool watching these guys up close. And so I kind of recommend the same thing for watching the Braves against the White Sox. Just let's watch Acuna, let's watch Riley, let's watch this offense full of locked in players, go about their business and see what good baseball looks like.
James, how do you think Pedro Grifol will handle a White Sox team if they get swept by the Braves and they're 0-6 heading to Kansas City?
Let's see.
To add to that, a little bit more context. Ron Washington held a closed door meeting after the second game because the Angels got their butts kicked by the Baltimore Orioles. And they came out and they played a lot better and they won on Sunday against the Orioles. If the White Sox get swept by the Braves, is that Grifol's technique as a manager? Is that, okay, if we're 0-6, I'm closing the doors from the media because I got some yelling and screaming to do?
I doubt it, because it's not really in his ethos of, if the idea that he needs to address the team would kind of be an admission that he's not addressing them as much as he needs to already, which is kind of the vibe he tries to communicate is that they're always meeting, they're always talking over everything is already being addressed. So the idea that things have slipped so much that he needs to call everybody in the room and shout, that's kind of not his thing. And he even made the thing in spring about how he doesn't like addressing the team as a big group. He doesn't think that's the way things really get communicated. That seems like a bit more of an old school approach, but also maybe something that someone with the gravitas of Ron Washington is maybe more suited to really pull off. I also think just the Angels are in a very fundamentally different spot with their team. they got Mike Trout in there, and Luis Robert might be as productive as Trout has been over the last calendar year, if not more. But I think there's a bit more of urgency of like, we need to convert this right now or make this winning, even if the roster obviously is not strong enough to really have that be realistic. I think everyone in the White Sox kind of know what the score is as far as what their team is. They're trying to establish more like a mentality. They're trying to change their style of play. Everybody who is in that clubhouse will tell you like, yeah, we can surprise some people, or we'll win more than you think we will. It's not like, holy crap, we're 0-3, we got swept. This is nothing like what we expected to be. I don't think it's the same kind of environment as last season. And last season, when maybe a closed door meeting would have really been merited at certain points in April, that wasn't really the style he gravitated to very quickly. I think it's a bit more of just sticking to the process. It'd be more how he's geared, though. I've covered Pedro a little bit. I didn't cover him all last year, but you can sense that, the frustration, the not seeing results, the kind of getting their head kicked in. Yeah, I think he said this was a heartbreaking loss, or, this just didn't go our way more than he liked to admit. I'm sure he's seen his career record tilt the way it's tilting, and it's building tension. So I can't ever rule it out, but that doesn't seem necessarily how this would go quite a bit more. And also, like, the first two Angels games, from what I saw, were a train wreck. The White Sox, I think, would generally look themselves in the mirror and say, we've played all right, but we can't get the big hit, which isn't too surprising because we can't hit. And that's going to be a season-long problem. So I don't know what screaming at us is going to do. So I don't know if that's the remedy to go to.
Well, again, we'll recap as far as that series between the White Sox and the Braves. Jim and I will be recapping that series. As a huge thanks to our Patreon supporters. James will be on a flight to Kansas City to cover that first road series for the Chicago White Sox as they visit Kauffman Stadium for the first time in 2024. The Royals dropped 2 out of 3 at home. And with future podcasts, especially the Monday episodes, folks, again, we don't want to get too dour. We don't want to suck all the love of baseball from everybody talking about the 2024 White Sox. So we'll take some time and we'll look around Major League Baseball. And what I'm fascinated when you look around Major League Baseball, Jim, the White Sox are not alone in this boat of getting swept at home. 4 teams, one obviously including the White Sox, got swept at home to start the season. The Houston Astros got swept, a 4-game sweep. The New York Yankees going on the road to sweep the Astros. That's huge. The Miami Marlins got swept at home by the Pittsburgh Pirates, and the New York Mets got swept by the Milwaukee Brewers in Queens. And that was a very contentious series, especially with Rhys Hoskins and Jeff McNeil jarring at each other because of a slide at second base. So that's what caught my attention. It's just, that seems odd, right? To see the way this season has started, that 4 teams with home series all get swept to start the year.
Yeah, especially like good teams. In the case of like the Astros, the Marlins are, maybe they were a little bit of a paper tiger, but they were supposed to be, on par or a level above the Pirates per se. And then you had like the Mets, who are Metsy, but still like supposed to be a threat if like health breaks their way. So yeah, it's a strange company, I think, for the White Sox to keep. The White Sox are the only team that was punting the year, whereas everybody else is supposed to be good. A few things that jumped out at me, like one with the Marlins team, like Avi Garcia, like being sad about being booed. That's, old friends checking on him. Like,
he said it's never happened before in his career.
Yeah, like, I guess.
Okay.
Either maybe like White Sox crowds weren't big enough to hear it, but yeah, or just he didn't register to the point of like he's disappointing us because like expectations had been set. But that's one thing. Like the other thing with the Braves coming to town, Aaron Bummer had like the ultimate Aaron Bummer inning, which prevented the Phillies from sweep. The Braves could have been another team getting swept, although it would have been at Citizens Bank. But like Aaron Bummer, 1 inning, 4 hits, a double play that was overturned on a review. The game-winning hit was a single that dropped in front of or in and out of the midst of a sliding Adam Duvall. So like the Aaron Bummer luck is still following him to the Braves, and just like his weird contact. So far, the Braves have not found like, oh, the White Sox were positioning themselves wrong the whole time, or, just one weird trick. Like he still walked the leadoff man with a huge lead. Also, he allowed a stolen base in that 4-hit inning. So like all the Aaron Bummer elements are there. So, perhaps it's one way where the White Sox might be able to turn the tides a little bit. And if they get into like a favorable situation where like Bummer is the last line of defense between the Braves and the lead, perhaps like the White Sox can cash in on that as they're still figuring out that whole experience. Also, like a great week for Mookie Betts, who was my predicted preseason MVP. So I'm happy to see that.
Yeah, as we record this, Mookie Betts, first 6 games of the year, 11 for 22 hitting, 4 homers, 2 doubles, 10 RBIs, 7 walks, 2 strikeouts. Just a crazy start for Mookie Betts.
How many walks do the White Sox have? I'm curious. Like, how many, as a team, how many walks do the White Sox have?
Oh, Betts has more walks. The White Sox walked 4 times on Saturday.
I think he ended once yesterday. So once. Yeah. 5 walks.
Yeah, Mookie Betts himself is out walking the White Sox in 2024. James, how about you, man? What caught your attention around Major League Baseball?
Well, since Jim mentioned it, now I want to check my predictions. Juan Soto AL MVP is looking all right. George Kirby AL Cy Young is looking okay. I haven't checked on Corbin Carroll. I was going to put Jordan Lawler. Now I don't have to learn it because he has thumb surgery. As my Rookie of the Year bet, and that was going to justify my like Diamondbacks World Series prediction. But luckily that popped up on the timeline about 10 minutes before I said press send on that to you. Maybe I'm too White Sox insular, but I was noticing just Bailey Ober getting obliterated on Sunday by the Royals. Mm-hmm. And, I think, especially with letting Sonny Gray walk, I mean, that's a Twins rotation. Not that I really see anyone as a super serious threat to them just yet. Obviously, the Guardians did very well, but in Oakland. But that's a rotation where they banked a lot on like that. They're able to internally replace what they had because they had so much depth, but for them to lose Royce Lewis, so early on and not even have Brooks Lee ready in minor leagues because he's also on the IL to replace him, and Ober looking that far off in his first start, it'd be in a situation where if they were in a division where they had someone really stomping on their heels, it would be kind of a nerve-wracking first weekend for them, even though they obviously won the series and otherwise look functional, but there's some leaks in the Great Lakes up north.
Yeah, the bullpen, like the Twins were supposed to have like the killer bullpen. They've had some injuries. The Astros were supposed to have like a bullpen first, I guess, off season because like the rest of their team's mostly fine. So it's like, yeah, let's get Josh Hader and really beef up that bullpen. And then they blew a series of late leads against the Yankees. So it's, I guess, slightly encouraging to know that like the White Sox weren't alone, both in like, thinking the bullpen would solve their issues, and also like that they picked uniquely wrong players to execute that vision with, and just, nope, it's just not a great idea to put all your resources in the bullpen baskets when, just a couple injuries can throw the entire order off.
Yeah. Like when reading articles about the Twins, it said like, well, they didn't have the offseason that they wanted, but they built up a super bullpen. And I just thought, oh no, I've heard that before. I mean, the similar thoughts of the Astros, but something to bears watching with the Astros is like, I think the popular conception of them, and rightly so, is like this very advanced, analytically minded team, because that's where kind of the tent poles of their franchise have been built up. But it's a team with, Click and, Luna departing over the last couple of years. Like, it's really become very, in scouting circles, somewhat a team that's known for doing things a lot more old school of recent. And I think you're seeing that with some of the signings they're doing and getting Hader and kind of tilting towards more traditional, free agent targets that really require kind of overpays and the places where the value might be, the returns might be on the margins, in a way where I'm really kind of curious to see how things progress for the next couple of years, because obviously you have this core that they've developed that was like really great and under cost control for a long time, but as they get expensive and are probably not super expanding their willingness to spend to retain everybody, it kind of remains to be seen with Bregman this offseason. I don't know if they're really kind of backfilling their internal depth in the same way, or certainly not the same methods that they were doing before. So it kind of watching them curiously, not that it necessarily applies to the White Sox, of just how they evolve over time, because they are kind of zigging where other teams are zagging in ways that people probably don't associate them anymore because of the reputation they built.
That's the Jeff Bagwell difference. And Jose Abreu so far 0 for 11.
Oh.
Yeah, he had a slow start last year, so not a great first series for old friend Jose Abreu, but that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. Again, on Monday, it is a 1:10 p.m. Central Time start. We'll have those pregame notes and everything updated on SoxMachine.com for you guys with the first pitch reports. That's a difference now that James is with us at Sox Machine, so definitely check out the first pitch before game start, as James is sharing some of the pregame notes that he's learning from the White Sox clubhouse and White Sox manager Pedro Grifol. Really insightful type of stuff to help enhance your viewing of the White Sox games before they get started. One thing I do want to note, a programming and exciting news for us. For the third straight season, Sox Machine is partnering up with 670 The Scores, Bernstein and Holmes, as we will be back with our weekly segments. But now we're going to be on their show twice a week. James will be joining Dan and Lawrence Mondays or Tuesdays, depending on Cubs games. And Jim and I will be joining Dan and Lawrence on Fridays, again, depending on Cubs starts. And we're very excited. So thank you to Mitch Rosen and Ryan Porth for approving that. And of course, our best friends, Dan Bernstein and Lawrence Holmes, and of course, Layla Rahimi as well, for letting us join their show and talk about the Chicago White Sox and the home of the Chicago Cubs. I always get excited to join their show. So Jim, again, the third straight season, this is big time stuff for us.
Yeah, based on the way last year went and how depressing the conversations got in a hurry, basically every first question or second question, especially from Dan, was like prefaced with just not even sure where to start getting into it, whether to get into it at all. So like I could have seen, like, for their health, not wanting to devote, so many segments to a team that may not be worth it, but maybe they're gluttons for punishment the way we are. And so, it's solidarity on that front.
Yes, again, very excited. So James will be joining them, I believe, on Tuesday on 670 The Score. Again, they are midweek, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. We'll be tweeting it out and posting on SoxMachine.com when we make those hits on 670 The Score. You can listen on 670 a.m. if you're locally in Chicago, or on Odyssey.com. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. And also a big thank you to everyone that made it out to the Remova Theater for our opening day eve show. It was so cool to see so many of our friends attend that show and let us know they've been listening to the podcast for many, many years. Thank you for sticking with us. And you can subscribe to the Sox Machine podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music, unless you listen to the podcast on Google Podcasts. On Tuesday, April 2nd, Google Podcasts will be gone. Meaning, if you've been listening to the Sox Machine podcast on Google Podcasts, you need to listen to our show on YouTube Music. YouTube Music is replacing Google Podcasts. So that's your PSA for Google and where you can find out the podcast. And speaking of YouTube, you can watch our videos and also listen to the podcast on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/SoxMachine. Follow us on social media. We're on all the platforms at Sox Machine. You can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh. And of course, follow James as well, as he provides those updates about the White Sox during the games and during the series at JR Fegan. If you enjoy our work and you want more, or you just want full access to all of our coverage about the Chicago White Sox, sign up at patreon.com/SoxMachine. As just as little as $5 a month, you gain full access to all of our coverage and also help support us to be able to send James out on the road to cover these road games. We also have other tiers of support if you want additional perks, like if you want to participate in our monthly Zoom calls where you can informally ask questions about the White Sox and what James is hearing and what we are doing at Sox Machine. We also have a couple spots open in our Veterans Committee level as well, so if you're interested in joining our VC, reach out to Jim and I on patreon.com/SoxMachine. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com, your home for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis and James Fegan, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.
So, you've got an idea for a business, the store of your dreams. There's just one thing to figure out: everything. That's why Shopify's all-in-one commerce platform makes it easy to sell online, in person, and everywhere else. Sell on social media, source products with an app to get that first sale feeling. It's the only solution that gives you everything you need to sell everywhere you want. So when you're ready to bring your idea to life, power it up with Shopify.
Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/listen.